My name is Annelise Thorne, and at 68, a quiet war was being waged within me. It was a war between Annelise, the mother, who saw only the radiant glow of her daughter's happiness, and Annelise, the financial advisor, the woman I had been for 40 years, who saw the flashing red lights of a catastrophic risk. The mother in me was winning, but the advisor, bless her prudent heart, was getting louder every day. My late husband, Arthur, used to say I had a sixth sense for bad investments. "You can smell a weak foundation from a mile away, Annie," he'd chuckle. Together, we had built our life on a foundation of granite, hard work, mutual respect, and the quiet dignity of his successful hardware stores. After he passed, my final and most important project became ensuring that same security for my only child, Elara. Now, at 34, Elara was engaged to Julian Devereaux, the scion of a family whose name was whispered with a kind of breathless reverence in Aspen's most exclusive circles. The Devereauxs were supposed to be a dynasty. My daughter, my brilliant, beautiful Elara, was about to marry into it, and the mother in me desperately wanted to be thrilled. But the advisor in me remembered the first meeting with Julian's mother, Genevieve. In the cavernous, cold foyer of their estate, Genevieve's smile was a thin, bloodless slash. When Elara, with nervous pride, mentioned that her father had owned a chain of hardware stores, Genevieve's eyes had swept over me. "Oh, how practical," she'd said, the words dripping with dismissal. The real wound, however, was the flush of deep, mortifying embarrassment that flooded my daughter's face. In that moment, Elara looked at me not as her mother, but as a liability. That look was the ghost haunting the plans for this wedding. It was less a celebration of love and more a strategic campaign for acceptance, funded entirely by me. The Elara's wedding fund, a six-figure joint savings account I'd established, was being drained at a dizzying pace. "The butterfly wrangler needs a $2,000 deposit, Mama. The ice sculptor's fee is non-negotiable." I'd nod and smile, but each staggering figure felt like a personal betrayal of a sacred memory. The memory came to me, sharp and painful, one afternoon after Elara called, breathless, about a $5,000 deposit for linens. Suddenly, I was standing not in my quiet kitchen, but on a sun-drenched patch of land 20 years ago. It was 10 acres of rolling hills and whispering pines. Our one-day place. Arthur had his arms around me, his voice full of dreams. "A small cabin right here, Annie. A porch overlooking the creek. Our own slice of peace." We sold that land. We sold our slice of peace without a moment's hesitation to fund Elara's MBA from a prestigious out-of-state university. It was an investment in her future, the best one we ever made. Now, watching that same investment being funneled into monogrammed napkins and a champagne fountain for a family who looked down on us felt like a desecration of Arthur's memory, of our shared dream. That evening, the mother's excuses finally ran out. The financial advisor took her seat. I walked into my home office, the command center where I had navigated the complex finances of hundreds of clients, and I did what I should have done months ago. I didn't bother with public records. I went straight for professional intelligence. I picked up the phone and dialed the private line of Alistair Finch, a brilliant risk analyst who started as my intern decades ago. "Alistair, it's Annelise Thorne," I said, my voice calm and even. "Annelise." A voice from the past. "I hope you're calling to tell me you're finally enjoying retirement." "I'm trying, Alistair. Listen, I have a strange question. Off the record, I need the institutional scuttlebutt on Devereaux Enterprises." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Alistair spoke again, his voice was low, cautious. "The Devereauxs. Annelise, that's a name I haven't heard in a positive light for a while. Why are you asking?" "My daughter is marrying into the family." A soft, sharp intake of breath. "Oh, Annelise. I'm sorry to hear that." My blood ran cold. "Tell me, Alistair." "It's a 5-alarm fire," he said, the professional jargon a chilling confirmation of my fears. "A catastrophic shipping venture in Asia gutted them 2 years ago. They're leveraged to the hilt, using their name as collateral, but the street knows they're running on fumes. They have a massive lien against their downtown property. We're talking foreclosure-level crisis. They are, for all intents and purposes, broke. The pieces snapped together with the sickening click of a bear trap. Genevieve's performative snobbery was a mask for her terror. Julian's slick charm was a salesman's pitch. Elara's frantic, panicked need to impress them was the desperation of someone who didn't know she was boarding a sinking ship. And the wedding, it wasn't a party. It was a life raft. It was a last-ditch, desperate infusion of liquid cash. My cash. The money from Arthur's dream. They weren't welcoming a daughter. They were acquiring an asset. When Elara called the next day, her voice full of forced cheer to talk about the Mother's Day brunch at the Devereauxs' exclusive country club, the advisor in me heard every unspoken word. "It's a very important event, Mama," she explained. "A chance for me to finally be seen as one of them." "Oh, how wonderful, darling," the mother in me said automatically. "I'll wear my blue silk dress." The silence on the other end of the line was not just a pause, it was a calculation. I could feel the panic radiating through the phone. In that moment, I knew with a certainty that settled in my gut like a block of ice that I wasn't just an embarrassing middle-class mother. I was a risk. I was the co-signer on the account, the one person with the financial literacy to see the truth. I was not just a problem to be hidden, I was an obstacle to be removed. And this Mother's Day brunch was the first move in their strategy to sideline me for good. The conversation I had been dreading arrived on a Tuesday evening, carried in on a wave of false sincerity. Elara and Julian entered my small, quiet home, their faces arranged in masks of grave concern. They sat on my sofa, directly across from a vase of vibrant yellow roses I'd placed on the coffee table, the same flowers Arthur used to bring me every anniversary, a detail Elara used to cherish. Tonight, she didn't even glance at them. They were a united front of loving, reasonable deceit. "Mama," Elara began, her voice a soft, gentle weapon. "We need to talk about the Mother's Day brunch." I waited, my hands folded calmly in my lap. The war inside me was over. The financial advisor had taken the command chair, observing, documenting. "Julian's mother, she's very excited to host," Elara continued, her eyes fixed on a point just over my shoulder. "It's a very formal affair at the country club. The guest list is very exclusive. Senators, CEOs, you understand." Julian, her fiancé, leaned forward, his voice a smooth, condescending purr. "Annelise," he said, the casual use of my first name a small, sharp jab. "My mother is from a different world. And this brunch, it's not just a meal. It's about networking, about solidifying our place. It's business." He was speaking in code, a language of exclusion I understood perfectly. He was telling me I was a bad investment. It was Julian who delivered the killing blow while Elara looked on with a pained, pitying sympathy that was more cruel than any anger. "We both think," he said, reaching to pat my hand as if I were a child, "that it's probably for the best if you don't come. You'd be so out of your element, and we wouldn't want you to feel embarrassed or uncomfortable." Elara chimed in, her voice an apologetic whisper. "He's right, Mama. It would be so stressful for you. We're thinking you could have a nice, quiet day here. Catch up on your gardening. Maybe watch one of your shows. We'll be sure to bring you a nice slice of cake afterward." They were managing me, scheduling my lonely day for me. The words "out of your element," "don't want you to be embarrassed," "stressful for you," were a monstrous, unforgivable insult. They were framing their own cowardice, their own deep, burning shame, as a kindness to me. I was being formally uninvited from a day meant to honor me. And in its place, I was being handed a pat on the head and a schedule fit for a shut-in. The mother in my heart finally went silent. The hurt was so profound it was no longer an emotion. It was data. The final, brutal data point in the ledger of my daughter's transformation. "I see," I said, and my voice was so quiet, so imbued with a new, chilling authority that they both flinched. "Thank you for your consideration. I would hate to be an embarrassment." They left soon after, their relief a palpable thing, leaving me alone with my beautiful, vibrant yellow roses. On Mother's Day morning, they stopped by for a perfunctory 5-minute visit. Elara, stunning in a ridiculously expensive designer dress I knew my money had paid for, thrust a cheap, cellophane-wrapped bouquet into my hands. Grocery store carnations, pink and white, the kind of generic, thoughtless flowers you buy when you've forgotten what someone truly loves. Happy Mother's Day, Mama, she chirped, her voice a little too bright. We'll call you later. Don't just sit around feeling sorry for yourself, okay? I played the part of the slightly wounded but ultimately forgiving mother. I smiled and gestured for a hug. As she leaned in, I held her for a moment longer than usual. The mother in me was gone, but the advisor was taking meticulous notes. I noted the feel of the silk dress, a $3,000 expense from the fund. I noted the scent of her perfume, $400 a bottle. I noted the cold, fleeting nature of her embrace. This hug was not an act of love. It was a transaction, a final, insulting, perfunctory payment. And with it, her account was settled. You two have a wonderful time, I said, my voice full of a quiet, chilling calm as I released her. Enjoy your celebration. As I watched them walk out my front door, as I saw them get into the luxury car I was still making payments on, my heartbreak finally, irrevocably crystallized. It became the cold, methodical fury of the financial advisor I once was. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten what I valued. They had forgotten my yellow roses. I had just been deemed unworthy of their time. I decided in that moment that they were unworthy of my money, the money from Arthur's dream, the money from the sale of our slice of peace. I went in my home office. I took out my old leather-bound ledger where I had tracked every contribution to the Elara's wedding fund. I looked at the staggering six-figure sum. And then I looked at the calendar. It was Sunday. The banks were closed, but they would open, I noted with a small, cold smile, at 9 o'clock sharp on Monday morning. My daughter and her fiancé had just enjoyed their last lavish, mother-funded celebration. The bill was coming due, and their credit with me had just been permanently, irrevocably revoked. The rest of my Mother's Day was spent not in sorrow, but in a state of cold, quiet, and deeply satisfying preparation. The profound public humiliation of being uninvited from my own celebration had burned away the last vestiges of my maternal sentimentality. The woman who had wept over her daughter's first scraped knee, who had beamed with pride at her college graduation, was gone. In her place was Annelise Thorne, retired financial advisor, a woman who understood contracts, who understood leverage, and who was about to conduct the most hostile and most personal takeover of her entire career. I did not wallow in self-pity. I got to work. I went to my old home office, a room filled with the quiet, orderly ghosts of my professional life, and I began to assemble my case. I took out the original bank agreement for the Elara's wedding fund, the one we had both signed years ago. I ran my finger over the fine print, my old, familiar friend, and there it was in clear, unambiguous language. For all withdrawals, transfers, or account closures exceeding the sum of $500, the signatures of both account holders, Annelise M. Thorne and Elara E. Thorne, are required. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Elara, in her youthful arrogance, had likely forgotten this clause existed. She had been making small withdrawals for years for dress fittings, for deposits on flowers, all under the $500 limit, never needing my signature, reinforcing her own delusion that the money was entirely hers to control. She had no idea that I, her silent, uninvolved mother, still held the ultimate veto power over her entire lavish wedding. My plan was simple, elegant, and utterly devastating. It was a plan of malicious compliance, of quiet bureaucratic warfare. I would not scream. I would not argue. I would not confront. I would simply invoke the terms of our contract. I spent the rest of the day preparing for my meeting at the bank. I laid out my best suit, a sharp, professional navy blue that I had worn to countless client meetings. I gathered my documents, my driver's license, my social security card, the original account agreement. I was preparing for this meeting as I would have prepared for any major financial negotiation, with meticulous attention to detail and a cold, clear, and unshakable resolve. As I worked, my mind was a calm, quiet sea. The emotional storm of the previous day had passed, leaving behind a strange, almost serene sense of purpose. For years, I had allowed my daughter to devalue me, to treat my love and my support as a given, an endless, unconditional resource to be exploited. I had allowed her to believe that I was just a mom, a soft, sentimental creature who could be easily manipulated. She had forgotten who I was. She had forgotten that I had spent 40 years in a world of numbers, of contracts, of consequences. She had deemed me unworthy of a seat at her new family's table. I was about to deem her unworthy of a seat at the bank. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of expensive champagne that had been sitting in my refrigerator, a gift from a former client. I poured myself a single, elegant flute. I sat on my quiet porch, the scent of jasmine hanging heavy in the warm night air, and I made a toast. To new beginnings, I whispered to the silent, watching stars, and to old contracts. The champagne was crisp, cold, and delicious. It tasted like freedom. It tasted like justice. It tasted like the sweet, satisfying prelude to a spectacular and very, very expensive reckoning. My daughter was sleeping soundly, her belly full of her future in-law's fancy brunch, her mind full of her perfect wedding plans. She had no idea that her mother, the woman she had so casually, so cruelly uninvited from her life, was about to, with a single quiet signature, freeze her entire future. Monday morning couldn't come soon enough. On Monday morning, I woke before dawn, my mind clear and sharp, my purpose absolute. I dressed in my navy blue suit, my movements deliberate, my heart a calm, steady drum. I was not a grieving mother. I was a financial advisor on her way to a very important meeting. I arrived at my bank at 8:45, 15 minutes before the doors even opened. I sat in my car, the legal documents resting in a neat folder on the passenger seat, and I watched the bank employees arrive, their faces full of the sleepy, mundane energy of a Monday morning. They had no idea they were about to become unwitting participants in my quiet, devastating act of war. At precisely 9 o'clock, I walked through the doors. I did not go to a teller. I walked directly to the desk of the branch manager, a man named Mr. Davies, whom I had known for years. "Annelise," he said, a warm, welcoming smile on his face. "What a pleasant surprise. What can I do for you this fine morning?" "Hello, Robert," I replied, my own smile polite but firm. "I need to discuss a sensitive matter regarding a joint account I hold with my daughter. I have an appointment." He ushered me into his private, glass-walled office. I sat down, placed my folder on his polished desk, and laid out my case with the calm, dispassionate precision of a seasoned professional. "Robert, as we discussed, I am the co-signer on a joint savings account, number 742B, also known as the Elara's wedding fund. I have reason to believe that the funds in this account are being mismanaged and are at risk. As a co-signer with full legal authority, I am here today to invoke my right to place an immediate and unbreakable administrative freeze on this account." His friendly smile faltered, replaced by a look of professional concern and confusion. "A freeze, Annelise? That's a very serious step. Is everything all right?" "No, Robert," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "It is not. My daughter is planning a wedding far beyond her means using funds I gifted her under specific protective terms. Her financial judgment has become erratic. I am acting now to protect the remainder of the asset from further mismanagement." I did not need to tell him the whole sordid story of the Mother's Day humiliation. In the world of finance, the language of mismanagement and protecting an asset was all that was needed. It was a language he understood. He pulled up the account on his computer. He saw the original agreement, the one with the dual signature clause. He saw my name, my authority, clear as day. He looked at me, his eyes full of a new, dawning respect. I was not just a grieving widow. I was a sharp, decisive financial actor protecting her interests. "I see," he said slowly, nodding. "You are well within your rights, Annelise." He printed out a single form, the account freeze authorization. He explained the terms. Once the freeze was in place, no funds, not a single penny, could be withdrawn, transferred, or accessed by anyone, including myself, without a new joint authorization signed by both me and Elara, in person, in his presence. It was a financial checkmate. I took the pen and signed my name with a steady, confident hand. He stamped the document, his movements crisp, official. "It's done, Annelise," he said, his voice full of a quiet gravity. The account is frozen, effective immediately. I thanked him, my work done. As I walked out of that bank and into the bright morning sun, I felt a profound sense of release, of power reclaimed. The trap was set. The fuse was lit. All I had to do now was wait for the inevitable, spectacular explosion. I knew that Elara, in her arrogance, had likely been writing checks against the wedding fund for weeks, assuming the money was an endless, accessible river. Checks to the caterer, to the florist, to the incredibly expensive wedding venue, checks that were, at this very moment, making their way through the banking system. Checks that were all, as of 9:15 on a Monday morning, about to bounce higher than a kite. I went home, made myself a cup of tea, and sat in my favorite armchair, a book open in my lap. I did not read. I just listened to the quiet ticking of the clock, counting down the hours until the frantic, panicked phone call I knew was about to come. The call from a daughter who was about to discover that her mother, the woman she had so cruelly deemed unworthy, was the one who held the keys to her entire kingdom. And she had just quietly, decisively changed all the locks. The fallout was not long in coming. The quiet, satisfying hum of my victory began as a series of frantic, panicked vibrations from my daughter's end of the world, a world that was, at that very moment, beginning to crumble. The first sign of the impending catastrophe came on Monday afternoon. The wedding planner, a woman with a voice as sharp and brittle as a shard of glass, was in her office finalizing the payment schedule. Her phone rang. It was the venue manager. "Cynthia," he'd said, his voice tight. "That deposit check from your client, Elara Thorne? It was just returned. Insufficient funds." Before she could even process this, another call came in. The caterer, his check had bounced too. Then the florist. Then the band. Her entire, carefully constructed event was a house of cards collapsing in real time. She called Elara in an absolute panic. "Elara," the planner shrieked into the phone, "what is going on? Every single one of your checks has bounced. The vendors are threatening to pull out. This is a disaster. You have to wire them the money now." Elara, confused and arrogant, had assured the planner it was just a bank error and had immediately tried to make a large online transfer from the wedding fund to cover the costs. And that's when she had been met with a cold, impersonal, and utterly terrifying message on her computer screen: "Contact bank administration." The first voicemail she left me was a masterpiece of bewildered fury. "Mama, what is going on with the bank? The wedding account is frozen. I can't access any of the money. You have to call them and fix this now." I did not call her back. I just listened to the message, a small, cold smile on my lips, and went back to reading my book. An hour later, her panic had clearly metastasized. Julian called her. His voice, usually so smooth, was cracking. "Elara, what the hell is happening?" The club manager just called my father. My father. He said our membership is at risk because of the bounce check for the venue deposit. He called it a profound embarrassment. Do you know what that means? The second voicemail from Elara was a different beast altogether, the arrogance replaced by the whining terror of a cornered animal. "Mama, please pick up the phone. The florist just canceled. The florist for my wedding. He said his check was returned. Julian's parents are furious. They're saying I'm humiliating them. This is a nightmare. You have to do something." I let that one go to voicemail as well. I imagined the frantic, whispered conversations, the blame shifting between her and Julian. He would be blaming her for not having control of her middle-class mother. And she would be lashing out, terrified of the perfect future slipping through her fingers. They had built their entire engagement on a foundation of my money, and I had just pulled the cornerstone. By Tuesday morning, their carefully constructed world was in a state of a full-blown, five-alarm fire. Elara's perfect wedding, the one she had been planning with such meticulous, snobbish detail, was evaporating before her very eyes. She and Julian, her fiancé, showed up at my house that afternoon, their faces masks of fury and disbelief. They didn't knock. They used their key and stormed in, finding me sitting calmly in my living room, arranging a bouquet of roses. "What did you do?" Elara shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly thing, all her polished sophistication gone. "You froze the account. The bank manager told me." "How could you do this to me?" You're ruining my wedding. Julian, her spineless shadow, stood behind her, his face a blotchy, furious red. This is insane, Annelise, he sputtered. That money is for our wedding. You have no right. I looked up at them, at these two spoiled, entitled children, and I felt a profound sense of pity for their profound, willful ignorance. No, Julian, I said, my voice quiet, calm, and utterly unyielding. You are mistaken. That money, I paused, letting my words sink in, is mine. It was a gift. A gift I was happy to give to my daughter to celebrate her marriage. But a gift, like any contract, comes with certain unspoken terms, the terms of love, of respect, of simple, common decency. I stood up, my gaze locking with my daughter's. And you, Elara, I continued, my voice now as sharp and cold as a diamond, violated those terms. You violated them when you decided that your mother, the woman who gave you that fund, the woman who gave you everything, was not worthy of sharing in your joy. You uninvited me from a Mother's Day celebration, a day meant to honor me. You deemed me an embarrassment. You decided I was not good enough for your new, fancy family. I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You have just been given a very important lesson in finance, my dear. A lesson about assets, about liabilities, about the true cost of ingratitude. You have been deemed unworthy of my time. And so, I concluded, a small, cold smile on my lips, I have deemed you unworthy of my money. The wedding fund is, as you so accurately put it, frozen. And it will remain so until I, and I alone, decide otherwise. They just stared at me, speechless, their faces a mixture of horror and a dawning, terrible comprehension. They had thought they were dealing with their soft, sentimental, easily manipulated mother. They had no idea they were dealing with Annelise Thorne, retired financial advisor, a woman who understood the fine print better than anyone, a woman who had just, with a single quiet signature, executed the most satisfying and most legally unassailable financial checkmate of her entire life. The week following my quiet financial coup was a slow, satisfying unraveling of their entire world. The frozen wedding fund was a time bomb that had detonated in the center of their lives, and the fallout was spectacular. Without access to my money, their lavish wedding plans were not just in jeopardy, they were in ruins. They were forced to make a series of humiliating phone calls, begging their vendors for patience, for extensions, for understanding. But the world of high-end weddings, as they were now discovering, is a world of contracts and deposits, a world with very little room for sob stories. The caterer canceled. The florist canceled. The band canceled. And finally, the beautiful, exclusive venue, the one that was to be the stage for their grand social triumph, canceled as well, keeping their substantial and now unreimbursable deposit. Their perfect wedding had been reduced to a pile of broken contracts and bounced checks. They came to me again a few days later. The fury was gone, replaced by a desperate, pathetic, and utterly broken humility. They sat on my sofa, the same sofa where they had so arrogantly informed me of my social exile, and they began to plead. Mama, Elara wept, her face blotchy, her expensive designer dress looking wrinkled and out of place in her new, diminished reality. Please, you've made your point. We were wrong. We were horrible. I was so stupid, so caught up in everything. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Please, just unfreeze the account. Let me have my wedding. Julian, her fiancé, nodded miserably, his head in his hands. He was a man completely, utterly defeated by a 68-year-old woman he had dismissed as out of her element. I let the silence hang in the air, a heavy, suffocating blanket. I wanted them to sit with it, to truly feel the weight of their new reality. Finally, Julian looked up, a flicker of his old arrogance returning. Annelise, look, we get it. You're upset. But this has gone far enough. This is Elara's dream. No, I interrupted, my voice cutting through his like glass. Let's be very clear. This was your dream. A dream of using my daughter and my money to bail out your family's catastrophic failures. Her dream was a performance designed to impress your snobbish mother. My husband's dream, I looked at Elara, was 10 acres of peace. You sold that dream for monogrammed napkins, so we will not speak of dreams. Elara flinched as if struck. Just tell us what you want, she whispered. We'll do anything. I'm glad you asked, I said, my voice calm and measured. I will agree to unfreeze the account, but not for you, for me. And things will be different from now on. The wedding fund is no longer a gift. It is an investment, and as the primary investor, I will be taking an active role in its management. I then laid out my new contract. First, I began, we will be planning a new wedding. A much smaller, much more sensible one. One that reflects a budget based on love, not on social climbing. Second, I continued, I will have final approval on all wedding expenses. Every single one. You will present me with a budget, and I will approve or deny each line item. The days of your blank check are over. And then I delivered the final, most important term. And third, I said, my gaze locking with theirs, a significant portion of that wedding fund, 50% to be exact, will be immediately transferred into a new, ironclad, irrevocable trust. A trust for my own future care. A trust that you, Elara, will have no access to, no control over, ever. You have proven yourself to be an untrustworthy steward of my generosity. I will, therefore, be taking care of myself. They were speechless. They had come to me hoping for a return to the old ways, to the endless river of my money. Instead, they had been presented with a new reality, a reality of budgets, of oversight, of consequences. To have their dream wedding, the one they still so desperately craved to impress their snobbish friends, they would now have to beg for every single dollar from the very mother they had uninvited from Mother's Day brunch. They agreed, naturally. In truth, they found themselves cornered, bereft of any viable alternative. The wedding, which eventually transpired several months down the line, proved to be an intimate, refined, and profoundly humbling occasion for all involved. As for myself, the mother of the bride, I occupied a role far exceeding that of a mere attendee. I was, in effect, the chief executive officer of the entire elaborate undertaking. The composed, influential woman seated prominently in the front row, my very presence served as an unwavering, persistent testament to the lesson they had endured with such evident pain and public scrutiny. I maintained a watchful gaze as Elara, her countenance carefully composed into a semblance of polite restraint, recited her carefully chosen vows. And when the inevitable moment arrived for the final disbursement of vendor payments, I insisted that she stand shoulder to shoulder with me as I meticulously scrutinized each and every invoice before affixing my signature to the corresponding checks myself. The concluding check, made payable to the newly appointed, decidedly more budget-conscious caterer, I signed with a theatrical flourish, subsequently directing my gaze towards my daughter. Observe closely, my dear, I imparted in a hushed tone, for this is the quintessential manner in which a woman of substance expertly manages her financial affairs. My retribution was absolute and comprehensive. It had manifested as a swift, understated, and impeccably lawful financial maneuver, entirely beyond reproach from any legal standpoint. I had achieved far more than merely recovering my misappropriated funds. I had successfully reasserted my authority, my self-respect, and my rightful position as the undisputed matriarch of my own familial domain. Furthermore, I had effectively safeguarded my own financial well-being for the foreseeable future, a security fueled directly by the very capital they had so brazenly attempted to employ in their endeavor to marginalize and erase me from the equation. They had harbored the desire to remind me of my perceived place within the hierarchy. And I had, indeed, become acutely aware of my place. My designated place, as fate would have it, was presiding confidently at the head of the table, wielding the pen with decisive authority as I signed the checks, thereby dictating the terms and orchestrating the flow of financial control.